Alright guys, Murphs here, and today, by viewer request, we're going to be going over my everyday carry or EDC loadout. One of the things that's important, guys, is to frequently reassess your equipment or your layouts and stuff like that, be it your tactical gear or your concealed carry handguns or your home defense plans and all those types of things. You should frequently reevaluate those things so that you're making sure you're taking advantage of the best, freshest ideas. Now, just because something's new doesn't mean that it's better, but when something is new, it does bear some investigation in order to be able to evaluate whether or not you're doing the best thing that you could be doing. Ideas, technology, all those types of things change, and it's important to try to stay on the forefront of that as much as you can. Now, sometimes circumstances dictate that you can't necessarily do that thing. A friend of mine recently just moved from Hawaii, and I knew him before he moved to Hawaii, and obviously I still know him after he moved to Hawaii, and he spent about 4 years there. And during that time period, he really didn't have his guns because Hawaii is quite strict on firearms ownership and everything that entails, all the processes and all those types of things. So, with that being the case, I went shooting with him this weekend, and he opened up his gun cases, and they were kind of like little time capsules. That's not to say that any of his equipment was bad. Things were set up. There are some things that do transcend time when it comes to, savvy arrangements and all those types of things. But, a lot of those were guns that he bought brand new and then moved. So, they were kind of frozen in time when it comes to, since then, newer models of those guns have come out that, perhaps if he had been more engaged in the firearms community, he would have, sold off the old and bought the new, or, updated, made some changes to those guns to better reflect some of the changing trends and concepts that have occurred in the last 4 years. Regardless, some things withstand the test of time, some things don't. I say all of that because in the process of putting this video together, kind of like conceptualizing what it was that I was going to discuss and all those types of things, I identified some stuff that I want to change about my setups, and that's never a bad thing. Deciding that you need to make some changes is not admitting that you were wrong. It is being understanding enough to know that things change. All right, so with that, why don't we go ahead and get into my setups. So first off, every morning I go to the gym, and when I do that, I grab this backpack. I don't know the brand of this backpack. I got it through work, and in this backpack goes my water bottle. I have a Yeti bottle. I also have come on. I also have a shaker cup, which has its own separate little compartment. This is where I put my aminos. I've been using BPI amino acids, and then also my pre-workout, which I've been drinking C4. This is, of course, only used on days where I am lifting. If it's a run day, I'm not taking pre-workout and then going for a run. Now, in addition to that, I also throw my keys and my wallet in there, and then I also have my headphones. These are some no-name headphones from Amazon I picked up a couple months ago because my AirPods crapped out on me. So one of the things that I found, as much as this is great, this holds a charge for like 2 weeks, I have found that the right earbud is not properly charging. So I've got to kind of like get in that compartment, and I try to blow out that compartment, and then also try to stimulate contact between the charger and the earpod itself. But if I give it like 5 minutes, this thing is charged and ready to go for an entire workout, and I think that's pretty awesome. So as much as I don't love these, they were under $30. They hold a charge for a really long time. Another annoying thing about them is that they will sometimes just reestablish connection on my Bluetooth. I don't really know how. I think it's just maybe the cover, the actual like closure like opens up a little bit, and then they're like, oh hey, it's time to play, and then try to reconnect to my phone. So I can't just disconnect from the headphones. I have to completely forget the device and then reattach the device every time that I need to use them. So that's kind of annoying, but for right now they're working, and I see no need to replace them. Now, in addition to those items, I also throw in this, a Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0 chambered in .40 Smith & Wesson. This is the full-sized This is actually my bedside gun, my current bedside gun. So I get up in the morning, I grab this off the bedside, I throw it into the front compartment of this pouch, or the front compartment of this bag, and then I go to the gym. Now we can see here I have a TLR 1HL. This has about 1,000 lumens output. It definitely turns light into day, that's for sure. One of the issues with this light though is, of course, it's pretty easy to bump the activation switch, and sometimes it gets turned on in my bag. It pretty much only gets turned on in my bag whenever I don't come home and instantaneously take the gun out of the bag and put it back on my bedside. Because anytime I do that, the light's not on. But anytime I don't do that, the light is on, and then the batteries die, and then I have to replace them. Now also, you'll see here, I have a Hard-Headed Veterans patch. I got that with my Hard-Headed Veterans helmet. So that gun goes into the front compartment of this pouch, and this is my defense to and from the gym, because I don't really want to carry a gun in the gym, on me in the gym. I don't, you know, there's really not a setup there that I like that, you know, is not potentially going to, you know, outrageously print or get uncovered, make everybody else in the gym uncomfortable. Like, I'm here to work out, let's work out, but I still want a defense to and from the gym. Now, it is good to go ahead and talk about off-body carry as an option. Historically, this is kind of another example of where I've recently kind of had to reevaluate some things. Historically, I was not a big fan of off-body carry because you could potentially run into a situation where you're struggling for your gun from an assailant. So somebody, you know, especially with like women, you know, there's a lot of people out there who advocate for concealed carry purses and all that kind of stuff. Well, if somebody's going to come up and try to snatch something off a woman, it's probably going to be her purse. And now, not only is she trying to fight to make sure that she has her wallet and her stuff and all that kind of stuff, she also has to fight for her gun. Now, the wallet and all those types of things, the credit cards, all that can be handled. You can cancel those things. You can get protection and all that type of stuff. You can just let that purse go. But if there's a firearm in there, that could massively destabilize the situation very rapidly. Not only did you just give a gun to a criminal, but also that criminal could potentially discover that firearm and use it against you. So that's one of the things that I don't like about off-body carry. But here recently, in like, you know, past couple of months or so, if not a little bit longer, I've come to realize that if off-body carry becomes the difference between having a gun and not, then off-body carry is acceptable, because that's the more important thing. A woman who's out, you know, walking around in a skirt and all that kind of stuff doesn't have a lot of really good concealment options and might have to preference off-body carry at that point. It is going to require that you be more aware of your surroundings and what's going on around you, which can be very taxing, and is actually a taller order than what most people might realize. But that is what you're signing up for when you decide to carry a gun, and that's most definitely what you sign up for when the situation requires that you carry a gun off body. So I have to grudgingly admit that there is a circumstance or situation in which concealed carry fanny packs are acceptable, which is unfortunate because I hate concealed carry fanny packs. But that is the reality. So that's my gym setup. Once I go to the gym, I then come home, get ready for the day, and go on about my business. So going into that, how do I dress? What is my attire? First off, what type of shirt I'm wearing depends on what it is that I'm doing. If I'm going to the range or doing some other type of, you know, working type activity where, you know, I'm gonna get sweaty and potentially like dirty and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to wear a t-shirt. If I'm just bebopping around, having fun, you know, hanging out with friends, you know, going out for drinks, whatever, I'm going to wear some type of collared shirt like you guys frequently see me wear whenever I am filming and all that kind of stuff. That's important because that determines the firearm I carry. And we'll talk about that more here in a bit. So I wear either a t-shirt or a collared type shirt, kind of in equal spades at that point. Pants. Pants are where things change quite a bit for me. So for a long time, I used to wear like, you know, Levi's or Wranglers or whatever. In 2020, I switched over to Vertex pants. This is their concealment pants. You can see here, model here for you for a second. What makes these concealment pants? Well, first off, these pants are sized to accommodate a holster. A lot of times whenever you're buying like non-purpose-built pants, people will upsize the waist size a little bit so that they can accommodate a holster. Because I was never big on that, so I wear a size 34. I would buy size 34 pants, and then I'd try to cram a holster in there. And things would get pretty tight and very uncomfortable very quickly, and I'd have to preference carrying smaller handguns. I can carry pretty much any size handgun I want in these pants. These are still size 34s, but every manufacturer has a little bit of variance in how it is that they measure or their stitching and how much material is left over. They all have a variance in what an actual 34 is, so you're supposed to try on clothes whenever it is that you're out there buying stuff. These pants are sized for a size 34 waist that is also carrying a gun, and I really appreciate that. It's not the only thing I appreciate about them, but it's one of the things that I greatly appreciate about these pants. Now, in addition to that, you also have magazine pouches built into them on either side, which are in between the back pockets and your hip pockets. And those are large enough to be able to accommodate an AR-15 magazine, which makes them wildly too large for a pistol magazine in an awful lot of circumstances. So like when I carry a Glock 42, if I drop that pistol mag into one of these pouches, it's gone. Gone forever. It's in a black hole. I can dig around in there and get that holster or get that magazine out of there, but then I'm going to have to reorient the direction that it's facing and all that kind of stuff. It's not a good pistol mag pouch at that point. So if I'm carrying something small like a Glock 42, I put the magazine in the coin pocket on this side. Now that's not necessarily the best setup because I'm a right-handed shooter, so I should be grabbing things off my left side with my left hand, but I'm able to orient the magazine in the proper direction, which is better than trying to fish around and then orient. So I've made that conscious trade-off in that case. Now, pistol magazines that have a decent bumper plate on them or something along those lines are able to be hooked into the top of that pocket, but that's not the most secure location. So like there's no retention built into this pocket. That magazine could fall out just as easily as it could fall back into your pocket, and then you're back in there trying to like fish around and get it out of there. It's not as bad on like a full-size magazine, but it's still something to take into consideration. I could understand someone preferencing some sort of like concealment magazine pouch still in these pants and maybe retaining those pockets for like AR-15 mags if you're in a situation where you're doing concealed carry with an AR-15. But like when it comes to competitions and stuff like that, I don't use those pouches very often. I get dedicated magazine pouches and find them to be better. It's still better than trying to fish it out of your pocket, but not by much. It's just a different pocket. And for like IDPA and stuff like that, technically these pants are not legal to use, so I don't use the magazine pouches in IDPA. But I have pistol mag pouches that I can use for it, and they work just fine. So that's not necessarily a deal breaker one way or the other. It's just an important thing to keep in mind about these pants. Now, in addition to that, these pants are cut in such a manner and sewn in such a manner that you actually get a lot of flexibility. You can actually kind of see the stitching here in the knees to where I have a ton of mobility, not just in my knees, but across my thighs, in my hips, in my groin, all that kind of stuff. So it might make these pants a little bit amorphous. They're not necessarily like designer pants that are gonna make your badonkadonk look super good, but the amount of mobility that you get out of these pants to be able to kneel, squat, shoot from a seated position, all that kind of stuff is unparalleled. These are absolutely fantastic. I have shot competitions, I've done my own training, I've done courses and stuff like that, and never felt uncomfortable in these pants. The only real complaint I have about these pants is that they don't really work well with like cowboy boots and stuff like that, which I used to wear upon occasion. They're not cut in such a manner to really be able to accommodate them. You kind of have to like tuck the pants in to the cowboy boots, and I'm not a fan of that. That looks ridiculous. So with that, I switched over to wearing Merrells. So I have these low tops here. I also have some high tops, which I've owned those Merrells, the low tops, since 2014. I bought the high tops in 2019. These boots have held up fantastically. I even got confused like a month ago and for some reason was dressed to go to the gym but had my Merrells on and like ran 2 miles in them and did not mess myself up, did not mess my feet up or anything along those lines, completed the run in the normal time that I would do the run and all that kind of stuff. So That was kind of a surprise. I didn't expect it to go that well. For a little while, I wore Ultimas, and I was a big fan of the Ultimas, except for a couple of things. One, they were all black, and the rubber would heat up in direct sunlight, and it was very uncomfortable on my feet. And then two, they blew out after a little over a year of use. Now, there's a lot of great things about them. They're not terribly expensive. They're very lightweight shoe. They're very flat, so they were excellent for, you know, deadlift and squats and all that kind of stuff. But I was unhappy, in comparison to the Merrells, I was unhappy with the longevity. Now, I'm going to stick with these Merrells until I blow them out and then reevaluate whether or not I'm going to go back to Ultimas, because I did really like the shoe. Just those couple of minor complaints. Now, belts. I actually forgot to mention this while I was talking about the pants. I wear Core Essentials belts, and I absolutely love these. These are substantial. I used to, bebop around and buy like cheaper belts and all that kind of stuff, and they would give up the ghost after 6 months to a year of concerted concealed carry and all that kind of stuff. These belts have lasted. I used to have a brown one, but I left it on a job in Chicago, and now I don't have a brown one anymore, so I need to get a new one. But you get the belt, you cut it to your size, so which you're going to need to cut it in order to be able to accommodate your holster. So you're going to want to go ahead and get your largest holster and cut this belt to size. So I have this cut to a 37 pant size. And then you have this kind of ratchet system. So you got this clippy-do right here that unlocks the belt, and then you have these areas here that it interacts with, which gives you the clicking sound as you insert it into the buckle. These are strong, durable belts. I 100% recommend them. Huge fan of these belts. All right, that's my attire. Why don't we go ahead and talk about my accoutrement, the accessories that I carry and wear. So, first off, sunglasses. I wear Oakley Flak Jacket 2.0s. About like 15 years ago, I bought my first pair of big boy glasses, which were not like cheapos from the gas station or something like that, and it was the Oakley original flak jacket. And then I left that flak jacket in the back of a cab in Oklahoma, and I decided that I was not responsible enough for big boy glasses, so I went back to buying gas station cheapos up until about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, when I decided that I was ready to be heard again, and I bought these Oakley 2.0s. I do need to replace the lenses on these. There's a scratch right over my eye, and it's really getting on my nerves. Now, the watch I wear is the Garmin Tactix Charlie, which I have to say that I don't get near as much use out of this watch in my personal life as I do in my professional life. In my professional life, I can take grids, I can plot grids, I can do altimeter stuff and all those types of things. In my personal time, I pretty much just check the time in text messages and sometimes pause music. This does also record calories burnt, steps taken, REM cycle, and all that kind of stuff, but I hate wearing this while I'm running, so I don't necessarily use it to time or anything like that. I don't like wearing watches while I work out, so it's not necessarily keeping accurate heart rate or calorie burn or anything along those lines. And I don't wear it when I sleep, so I'm not really getting an idea of what my REM cycle looks like. It's just a really, really fancy timekeeper at that point. Another thing to keep in mind with these is that, this is kind of getting back more to the professional type thing, but it is worth saying, this battery life goes way down when you start plotting grids and trying to do really serious stuff with this. So I would consider this to be a good backup to, whatever dedicated GPS you have, but I would not consider it a replacement of a GPS, not if you're doing frequent GPS stuff. Right now, for those of you who haven't noticed, I wear hearing aids. I have 2 of them. At one point I just wore 1, but eventually I was forced to get 2. These are the Resounds. They are Bluetooth capable, so I can take phone calls on them. I can listen to music, I can listen to YouTube, all that kind of stuff. And I'm actually having some issues. So the right one right now doesn't like to connect to my Bluetooth all the time, which is kind of annoying. And then it also keeps getting choked up with earwax super fast. I don't understand how that's happening. They have the same domes on them. And then the left one has been giving me a lot of feedback off of other surfaces. So if I'm in really any environment, at first I thought it was just if I was next to siding or something along those lines, but I've had feedback off of wood, I've had feedback off of concrete, all that type of stuff. So it's probably time for new ones. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. Okay, what is the stuff that's in my pockets? Well, of course, I have wallet with my, ID cards, driver's license, concealed carry permit, all that kind of stuff. I have my keys, which, of course, have my gym permit on there as well. I have a challenge coin, because, can't get caught without one of those. And those are kind of like the simple things that I have. Now, also, I carry a pocket knife. Now, some of you might be surprised to know that I'm actually an amateur knife collector. I don't spend as much money on it as I used to, because now all my money goes towards guns, ammunition, and accessories. But I do try to keep a good knife with me. Now, the requirements that I have for my personal knife as opposed to a professional knife are two very different things. I've carried all kinds of personal knives. I've carried like trappers, I've carried like a case rust lock for a little while, and then also pocket clipped associated knives. There was a while I was carrying a Buck 110 on my belt. I eventually went away from that. This is the Kershaw Iridium, which has been probably 10 years since the last time I carried a Kershaw, which I think was like the Kershaw Leak or something like that. Some Ken Onion inspired design. Now this has a just under 3.5 inch, like 3.25 inch blade, which has this spear shape. It's a very slender blade, which I really appreciate. I don't intend to do a lot of heavy cutting tasks with this, so I don't need a big honking blade on it. The steel is D2, which is interesting to me because this is I got this for like under 70 bucks. In this same price range, it would be far more common to see like 8CR13 MOV or Alsate or a lot of like not what I would consider to be good steels, where D2 is a pretty premium steel, honestly. Now we see we have thumb studs for deployment, and we also have a copy of the Benchmade Access Lock. I'm not entirely sure what Kershaw calls it, but that's what it looks like to me. Our grip scales are aluminum, which are in this gray color with orange accents, which is where our pocket or our lanyard loop is. This is a very lightweight knife. I forget that this thing is in my pocket. Absolutely love it. Like how slim and lightweight it is. I prefer tip-up carry, and this is a reversible tip-up carry clip. This is a fairly deep carry setup, which means that it's not necessarily protruding out of my pocket, which I appreciate. It's actually a complaint that I have about my professional use knife right now, which kind of protrudes from my pocket a little bit, and that was annoying me this week when I was wearing a holster. So that happens. It's something I'm going to have to evaluate further. Now, as much as I love how lightweight and slim and all that kind of stuff this knife is, I do not love the contours of this grip, and I would not preference this knife for heavy cutting tasks because of that. In general, if I know I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of heavy cutting tasks, I prefer to have a fixed blade, but like especially right in here where your finger goes, tours of this grip, and I would not preference this knife for heavy cutting tasks because of that. In general, if I know I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of heavy cutting tasks, I prefer to have a fixed blade, but like especially right in here where your finger goes, that's hot spots. That's like blisters waiting to happen. So I would not necessarily default to this for that type of purpose. But for just opening boxes, a lot of the casual cutting tasks that might pop up in a day, this knife is perfectly acceptable. Now, in addition to that pocket knife, I also carry a defensive knife. This is the CRKT Obaki, which is kind of a diminutive version of the CRKT Hisatsu. Now, I carried a Hisatsu 12 years ago, 11 years ago, something like that, and loved it. However, it's a very large knife and not very good for daily concealed carry. The Obaki, on the other hand, is much more diminutive in size, but there are some drawbacks associated with it. Now, one of the things is the sheath. Would it be better to have a clip on the sheath? Yes and no. One of the things that I love about this lanyard arrangement, which I just loop this lanyard around my pants loop, and then I tuck the knife into my waistband. One of the things that I like about that is that I can rearrange the knife if it's uncomfortable for some reason. If it's in any way sticking me in a manner that I don't want to be stuck, I can move it out of the way, and it's still retainable, where you don't necessarily have that with an actual like belt clip. But one of the things that I don't like about it is when it comes to the draw of this knife, I have to reach the extent of the lanyard before the knife falls free of the sheath. I could see that potentially being problematic if you're in a very close range fight. and somebody could deny you the opportunity to be able to get that knife to fully clear it and potentially get you into a situation when you're in a struggle for your knife. I don't really like that. I have to admit, I'm not a big fan of that overall. But I do like the carry setup, and I have been carrying this thing for almost a decade. Now, in addition to, having to hit the extent of the lanyard and then potentially getting into a struggle for your knife, after you draw this continues to kind of hang out there, and it could definitely get caught on things or potentially be used to grab you and bring you in or something like that. If, again, you're engaged in very close range fighting, that's potentially problematic. Now, in addition to that, I don't love this grip. Now, I can take off this cord, and there is a pebbled grip underneath, but it's the same dimension as this blade, and I don't really love that. I would like a more hand-feeling grip that also has more texturing. So, like the Hisatsu had a rubberized grip with a crossguard. If I remember correctly, it had a crossguard. Maybe it didn't have a crossguard, but regardless, it had a rubberized grip, and I would prefer to have that. I would also love to see a crossguard on this knife, because again, it's not very firm and it's not very secure in the hand, and anything to keep me from getting up on the blade would be really nice. Now, why do I carry a defensive knife? A couple of reasons. One, knives don't run out of stab. Guns run out of bullets. So I do appreciate having something that even if the gun no longer works, I can still defend myself with. For whatever reason the gun doesn't work. Out of ammo, malfunction, gets taken away from me, I still have the ability to defend myself. In addition to that, there's a lot more places I can take a knife than a gun. And sometimes you got to be in places where you can't have a gun. So with that being the case, I always keep a knife on me. That's the Obaki. Now, I also carry a flashlight with me pretty much everywhere I go. This is the Streamlight Stylus Pro. It's about 100 lumen output, a little clicky cap on the back here, and a pocket clip. Couple things with this light. First off, this is incredibly durable. It's not the most powerful light in the world, but being light and small and slim, it's very easy to have with you, which the light you have is better than the light you don't. I actually have been carrying this since like 2018, maybe 2017, somewhere in that time frame. And this is actually the second one of these I've had. So I finally managed to wear out the last one. I contacted Streamlight. They told me to send it in. I paid for the shipping there. They sent me a brand new one. So I appreciate that I have managed to get two for roughly the price of one at this point. Now, this does run off of AAA's, which I appreciate. And while it doesn't have the greatest outputs, it's just fine for very common tasks. Now, if I needed to do like dedicated flashlight type stuff, this is not necessarily the light that I would default to. If I'm in a more tactical situation, I want a much more powerful light. But I have used this in some professional capacities in the past. And I've even kept this as a bedside light. Now, is a bedside light better to have than a weapon-mounted light? This is a topic of frequent discussion. I would say that it's good to have both to give yourself flexibility. And I did keep this on my bedside table whenever I had a gun that was not equipped with the light. However, now I do. And in my current defensive situation, if something goes bump in the night, I know whether or not I have a non-threat moving around the house. So, if something goes bump, it's pretty quick and easy for me to identify whether or not I need, like, a pistol-mounted light's not going to be an issue in this case. Because most likely, if someone's moving around in the middle of the night, they're not supposed to be there. They are not supposed to be here, and I'm going to handle it very quickly. At that point, having a weapon-mounted light, not a big deal. Now, if you're somebody with kids or something like that are potentially, like, trying to sneak into the kitchen to get a cookie in the middle of the night, you may not necessarily want to point a handgun at your kid. It might be more advantageous to have a handheld light and then adjust accordingly. So that's the kind of back and forth with that. It's very situational. There's not a whole lot, in life in general, there's not a whole lot of like one size fits all answers. And that's it. Anyone who tells you otherwise is silly. So keep that in mind. All right, so that's my light setup. Let's go ahead and get to what we're all really here for. What handguns do I carry? Now, as was previously discussed in a video of guns I've carried for concealed carry, which I'll post a link for that video in the description, I change up guns based on how I'm dressed. I do not dress according to what gun I'm trying to carry. And as previously mentioned, I wear either t-shirts or collared shirts, and that will drastically change what gun I can carry. So what I went ahead and did was pulled a representative batch of handguns that I've carried in the past couple of days. We'll talk about each one of these as we go. So generally, I try to start off with the largest handgun I can, which winds up being this SIG M11A1, chambered in 9mm.
Stand by.
Huge fan of this pistol. Can't wait to get it on the channel. Just discovered that I have some light rust occurring on the grip screws here. I'm going to have to fix that later. I carry this in a, who is this again? Vetter holsters inside the waistband, Kydex holster. Huge fan of this setup. So this is the largest gun that I generally default to carrying. It used to be my Browning High Power. I've recently retired that gun and have instead been defaulting to the SIG. Now, also this week, I carried this Smith & Wesson Model 36 with a 3-inch barrel. And I carried it in this, who made this again? Popping Rock holster made by George Bowers, which I picked up. This was a gentleman who did a lot of leather working and would come to the gun shows and stuff like that, and this was one of the holsters that he made. This is actually a really well put together holster. The stitching's excellent. It's held up super well. I've been very happy with it. It's the last one of these that he had. Now, should you conceal carry with a leather holster? This is another topic of debate. Some people feel that Kydex, since it makes a noise when you draw, could potentially give away your tactical advantage. I don't know how viable of a concern that really is. Especially since if you're drawing the gun, you should be getting, like, you're moving into engaging that target. So they have to be pretty fast on the uptake. Like, you probably weren't going to beat them in the draw anyway if the sound of your gun being drawn is the thing that gives you away. Now, other people, this is a more doctrinal thing, other people will say that you should be able to reholster your gun without looking at it, and that since leather deforms, it could potentially wind up in your trigger guard and could cause the gun to discharge. The first one, if you're dealing with quality leather, shouldn't be a problem right off the bat. But the not having to look at your gun to reholster it doesn't make any sense to me. I understand being threat oriented, but if I'm reholstering my gun and I still have a threat in front of me, I'm an idiot. The only time this gun should be going away is when the situation is resolved. And if I think for a minute that the situation is not yet resolved, I should keep my gun out. So once the decision is made to reholster this gun, there's no more threat, and it's completely fine for me to look at my holster to put the gun away. You want to have that discussion when it comes to reloads and stuff like that? Okay, fine. I will entertain those arguments one way or the other. That's a completely different discussion for another time. But when it comes to holsters, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I'm completely fine with carrying leather holsters, especially fine leather like this. Now, in addition to that, I've also carried this Gen 3 Glock 26. Also chambered in 9mm if you guys don't know what a Glock 26 is. So this gun I actually carried in this Hellbent holster. which is another Kydex inside the waistband. Oh no, they know I've drawn my gun type of deal. No real complaints here. And actually, this gun is going to come up later in another portion of our discussion here. And then I also carried the Smith & Wesson Model 642 Chambered 38 Special in this Tagua leather inside the waistband holster. So you guys can see I am completely fine with full-size handguns, subcompact 9mm, as well as revolvers. I feel very comfortable being able to defend myself with any of these options. Now, with that being the case, do I carry reloads? That is perhaps a more in-depth conversation for another time, but one of the things that I will touch on is that if I am at 10 rounds or less in capacity, I will carry a reload. So especially when it comes to revolvers, I make sure I have a reload on me. And I generally carry in this speed strip from Bianchi. I prefer speed strips over speed loaders because they are slim and they're easier to be a part of my overall concealment concept, while still being fairly quick to reload, especially since if I'm doing like a shoot to, load to type situation, or, you know, I got in an engagement, I only fired like 3 rounds and I don't want to dump the whole cylinder. I can just peel off 3 rounds out of this speed strip and be about my day. I appreciate that. That is very helpful. When it comes to semi-autos, again, it comes down to capacity, and also it comes down to proximity to my home. If I'm within my town, my kind of comfort area, I'm less concerned about carrying an additional magazine. If I'm leaving, I'm far more interested in doing it. And a further discussion on carrying a reload is really a topic for another time. We got a lot to cover still as it is, and I don't want to spend too much time on just that. Now, you'll note that all of the options that I showed you were inside the waistband holsters. I do not endorse open carry. Not a big fan of that idea. Now, this winter, I might change my mind. It depends on how much time I'm spending outside, though. For the most part, I default to inside the waistband holsters. Now, you'll also notice that none of those were appendix setups. I have nothing against appendix carry. I have just not yet invested the money in appendix holsters. I carry off of the 4 o'clock position. I'm very comfortable with carrying off the 4 o'clock position. I see no reason to preference changing right now when I have so many other things that require my money. I have a finite amount of cash in the bank account. So when it comes to ammunition, setting up new guns, and then also evaluating old systems for update, you can see where, you know, cash becomes very thin very fast. So with that being the case, I've been sticking with inside the waistband 4 o'clock position carry. I want to get to appendix carry though. Not only is it a more streamlined method of presentation and all that kind of stuff, but it's also more accessible inside of a vehicle, and I do appreciate that type of utility. All right, so there's all those things. That covers a lot of the subject, but we do still have one more thing to talk about, and that is this backpack. All right, now this is an Ogio, I don't really know how you're supposed to pronounce that, Ogio Excelsior, which I also got through work. In this pack, I'll generally throw in snacks and stuff like that because I become a not friendly person whenever I am hungry. So I try to make sure that I keep some food around. Plus, you know, I lifted or something like that, I'm gonna need some protein, you know, to feed the gains and all that type of stuff. Right now, this is loaded up with a change of clothing because I am on call, so I want to make sure that I have something to change into as I move about my day. And then also, I keep this, an Aero Precision EPC9 chambered in 9mm. This is my little 9mm PCC SBR. So right off the bat, I have an 8.3 inch barrel. I have a Streamlight ProTac Rail Mount 1. I have MFT flip up irons. Well, ran out of plastic, but you get it. I have an AEMS Holosun with the circle dot reticle selected. BCM grip. I have a Franklin Armory binary trigger. There we go. Almost called it an Echo trigger, but that's from Fostech. I have a Franklin Armory binary trigger placed into this gun. Now, binary triggers fire on both the pull of the trigger and the release of the trigger, which means that you get kind of like 2 rounds for the motion of your trigger, but it is 2 individual movements, which makes it not classified as a machine gun, as opposed to the recent ATF determination on the forced reset triggers that since the trigger is the thing that moves your finger, its classification is now classified as a machine gun. As much as I don't agree with government overreach and the existence of the NFA just being an absolute violation of the Constitution, I can understand where somebody would use legalese to be able to determine that the FRT is a machine gun. Don't like it, because I don't see why we can't own machine guns. But I grudgingly can see how FRT flew too close to the sun on that one. Now, this setup, I actually like the binary trigger, not because I can sit there and like get really fast speeds and all that kind of stuff. It's actually really easy to outrun this trigger because a lot of it comes down to the weight of your bolt, your buffer, your spring, all that kind of stuff. Like those things all play a part in whether or not the system's going to run correctly, let alone your magazines, which this does run off of Glock magazines. But what I like about it is it actually kind of reminds me of when HK used to put the 2-round burst options in their MP5s. So it makes it really handy. You can come up on a target and go, you know, flip it onto the binary setting and go bang, 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 and all that kind of stuff, and have a really fast follow-up shot. That I appreciate. I think that's pretty cool. And it's one of the reasons that I preference having it in here. Long-term viewers of the channel know that I do not prefer to fight with pistol cartridges whenever it is that I can avoid it. But being able to have that fire on draw and release helps me rationalize using this weapon system in a defensive type role. Like handguns, for those of you who don't know, the opinion on this channel is handguns are fight stoppers because they are convenient, not because they're good at it. I would sooner fight with a rifle, but this is a compact setup that works off of the same magazines as some of the guns that I carry. We'll get into that more here in a minute. But we also have a Sylvan Arms folding adapter on here, which makes this to a very nice, tight, compact size to be able to place into my backpack. And you will note that I have an SBA3 brace on here, yet I called this an SBR. I originally built this as a pistol, then the ATF changed their determination, and since I already own SBRs, I saw no real reason to not go ahead and SBR this gun. Now, of course, just a couple of days ago, as of the filming of this video, the Fifth Circuit Court overturned the ATF's decision, declaring it unconstitutional. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes with that. I don't think that fight is over with. I'm pretty sure the ATF is still going to try to win. But if it gets overturned, I'll just build another pistol. I have kept this brace on here because it is small, it is lightweight, and it's moldable, which is one of the things that doesn't necessarily make it the best stock to begin with, but I still get an additional point of contact, which that's the advantage of rifles over pistols, is being able to have 3 points of contact and be able to take a more precise shot and have better recoil management and all that kind of stuff. While it also doesn't necessarily inhibit my ability to be able to conceal it in my backpack. So I can throw this down in there and have this thing all folded up, and it's not necessarily going to cause any additional sticking points into my back or make the backpack look more suspicious or anything along those lines. So that's why I've kept that on there. There's not really an AR-15 style stock out on the market that meets all of these points. Now I also have a Vickers Tactical 2-point adjustable sling on here. That's my favorite sling setup. If you've seen any of my rifle videos, you guys know about that. Now, one of the big things that I just recently had to reassess when it comes to carrying this little carbine is that perhaps I should be changing how I preference my concealed carry handgun. So with that, perhaps I need to be preferencing this Glock 26 more often, since this magazine will 100% fit into this gun. So I would have more ammunition to be able to feed my larger weapon system. So that's kind of what's going to be going on moving forward. If I can, I'm going to try to accommodate the carry of this handgun or other Glocks as that comes up. Now, in addition to that, in this pocket, I also keep a reload for my EPC-9, which would also work in my Glock 26. Now, the big thing about this is this setup pretty much stays with the truck. Unless I'm like hiking or something like that, this gun doesn't really come out with me. The idea here is that I'm going to fight my way back to this gun. If I'm in an austere enough situation that I'm taking on multiple attackers, or I'm perhaps facing down some sort of, like, I don't know, post-apocalyptic event, or, some sort of mass shooter or something along those lines, I would like to have a more capable weapon system available. Now, that doesn't mean that it has to go on me everywhere it is that I go, because we talked about the off-body carry thing not too long ago. But if I can fight my way back to it and then get that gun into the fight, that would be a lot better than trying to do the whole fight with a handgun. So that's kind of how I evaluate that overall. That's why I have this weapon system available. If I was actually doing any like cross-country travel and all that kind of stuff, this would not be the gun that I would pick, because again, we're talking about proximity to my safe space and all that kind of stuff. The further out I go, the more ammunition and the more powerful weapons I want. All right, guys. I think that pretty much covers my thoughts on this particular subject. This is one of the longer videos I've done in a while because we had such a wide variety of things to cover. But I hope you guys found this interesting, and that's pretty much what I got. Have a good day.